Growing up, my family, we spoke English at home, and I think my mom felt sort of pressured, like being a new immigrant. She immigrated to New York when she was in her 20s, I think, and then she got married to my dad when she was 27, and then or 30 maybe? No, she had me when she was 30. So she was very young, and then I think she just kind of felt pressure to sort of conform maybe, especially coming here. The first person she ever dated was my dad, this white guy. And so my dad's parents immigrated from Ireland, but he was born in the Bronx and stuff. So very much assimilated to American culture, and I think she felt that pressure, especially because everyone else in my family, they married other Filipinos, and my dad's family, they married other Irish people. So we're kind of the only mixed race family, I guess, in the whole bunch. So she was definitely an outlier in that sense, and so I think she was just oh, we're gonna speak English. And my dad also was he's not very good about, I don't know, getting immersed in my mom's culture. And so he would get mad if so my grandma moved in with us in the early 2000s, I guess, 2004-ish. She came from the Philippines. And so he would kind of get mad when my mom and my grandma spoke, so they're Bisaya, so they spoke Bisaya at home. And he would get kind of mad because he felt they were excluding him or talking bad about him. And I was it's not all about you, but so yeah, so I think that's kind of the reason. But now as we've gotten older, now she's mad that we don't speak Tagalog or Bisaya, and I'm well, you never taught us growing up. And then my family, everyone else is Filipino, both of their parents are Filipino, and so they all speak Tagalog and Bisaya, and so it's just been kind of isolating, I guess, growing up in that kind of family, because it's we were never taught it, but then they make us feel bad for not learning it, but it's hard to learn it when you're older. And then my dad is also kind of against it. And even with food and stuff, my mom would cook Filipino fish and stuff like that, and my dad would get really mad about the smell in the house and stuff like that, and just judgmental about that. And so I felt even if I wanted to connect to that side of my culture, it wasn't really a safe place to do that in my house. And then if I went to my Filipino family, they'd be well, why don't you already know Tagalog and whatever, and oh, why don't you eat all of these foods and stuff like that. And it's well, I wasn't really allowed to. So yeah, it's just definitely conflicting. And I think I also kind of go through phases where because I especially I went to Catholic school in the suburbs of New York, and so a lot of people were white, and so I also felt that pressure to assimilate into that white American culture, and bringing Filipino food to school for lunch was always kind of nerve-wracking as well. And so I feel I identified more with my white culture when I was younger, and then kind of grew up and I resented my dad for all of that, and I was okay, let me now connect to my Filipino culture, and then sort of did a full 180 and rejected that whole other side, and then now I'm trying to find a balance. So that's been hard, but yeah. So sometimes I think about it and I'm oh, I'm biracial and bisexual and maybe gender fluid, I don't know, still figuring it out. Yeah, I always think it's funny that I'm part of so many different things, and I think sometimes it's exhausting to try to be part of so many different things. But I think it's also maybe made me more open, in terms of being bisexual, for instance. I'm just kind of used to having to navigate two different worlds and not fitting in quite so well in either, or because it's kind of when I'm with my Filipino family, I'm too white, but then when I'm with my white family, I'm too Asian. So I think that's kind of the same thing with sexuality and gender. It's if I'm in queer spaces, it's oh, well, I feel I present maybe heterosexual, or I present cisgender, and so I feel kind of out of place, but I know that I'm not. So it's I have experience in that, so on one hand it makes it easier, but on the other hand it's also just exhausting to have to do that in all of the spaces of my identity, if that makes sense.